At its peak, the Persian Empire stretched from Greece to India, from the Sahara Desert to the steppes of Central Asia. It was home to 44% of the entire world's population, a number no empire before or since has ever matched. But here's what makes Persia different from every other empire in history. It wasn't built on pure force. While other conquerors burned cities and enslaved populations, the Persian kings did something almost no one else was doing in the ancient world. They let their conquered peoples keep their languages, their religions, their customs, and their local rulers, and in doing so, they built something that lasted 200 years. This is the story of the Persian Empire and the king who started it all. To understand how extraordinary Persia was, you need to understand the world it replaced. Before the Persians, the dominant power in the ancient Near East was the Assyrian Empire, and the Assyrians were feared for one reason above all others: systematic brutality. The Assyrians pioneered a strategy of deliberate terror. When they conquered a city, they didn't just defeat it, they destroyed it as a warning to everyone else. Mass deportations, public executions, entire populations relocated across the empire to prevent resistance. Their records, which they kept proudly, describe in graphic detail the fates of those who resisted. It worked for a while. But empires built entirely on fear require constant violence to sustain themselves. The moment weakness appeared, subject peoples revolted. The Assyrian Empire collapsed in 612 BCE under the weight of coordinated rebellions. Into this vacuum stepped a small Persian tribe from the region of Anshan in what is now southwestern Iran. They were not powerful, they were not wealthy, they were vassals, subjects of the Median Empire, the dominant power in the region after Assyria's fall. Their king was a man named Cyrus, and Cyrus had a completely different idea about how to build an empire. Cyrus II, known to history as Cyrus the Great, came to power around 559 BCE. Within 20 years, he had conquered more territory than any ruler before him, but it was how he conquered that set him apart. In 550 BCE, he overthrew his own Median overlords, not through a bloody war of extermination, but by winning over the Median army, which defected to him. He kept the Median nobility in place, respected their customs, and absorbed their empire rather than destroying it. Then came Lydia, the wealthy kingdom of King Croesus in what is now western Turkey. Croesus was legendarily rich. The phrase "rich as Croesus" survives to this day. He had consulted the oracle at Delphi before attacking Persia, who told him that if he crossed the Halys River, a great empire would be destroyed. He took this as encouragement. The great empire that was destroyed was his own. Cyrus defeated Croesus in 546 BCE, and again, instead of executing the defeated king, as virtually every conqueror before him would have done, he spared him. According to some accounts, Croesus became an advisor at the Persian court. Then came the greatest prize of all, Babylon. Babylon was the most famous city in the world. Its walls were so massive, they were considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It had never been taken by storm. In 539 BCE, Cyrus walked in through the gates without a battle. The Babylonian priests, tired of their own king, had opened the city to him. What he did next shocked the ancient world. When Cyrus entered Babylon, he issued a declaration. It was inscribed on a clay cylinder, now known as the Cyrus cylinder, and it said something no conqueror had ever said before. He declared that he had come not as a destroyer, but as a liberator. He would respect the Babylonian gods. He would restore their temples. He would allow deported peoples to return to their homelands. Among those peoples were the Jews, who had been held in Babylonian captivity for decades. Cyrus sent them home. He funded the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. In the Hebrew Bible, Cyrus is called a Messiah, an anointed one, the only non-Jewish person in the entire text to receive that title. The Cyrus cylinder has been called by some historians the world's first declaration of human rights, though scholars debate how far that interpretation goes. What's clear is that it represented a fundamentally different philosophy of empire: rule through consent and respect, not just through fear. This wasn't just moral, it was strategic. An empire where subject peoples actively supported the ruler was far more stable than one where they were waiting for the chance to revolt. Cyrus had figured out something that took most of the ancient world centuries more to understand. He died in battle in 530 BCE, fighting nomads on the eastern frontier, but what he built didn't die with him. After Cyrus, the empire passed through several rulers before landing on the man who turned a collection of conquered territories into a genuine administrative superpower. Darius I, Darius the Great, came to power in 522 BCE after crushing a series of revolts following the death of Cyrus's son Cambyses. Where Cyrus was a conqueror, Darius was a builder. He divided the empire into 20 provinces called satrapies, each governed by a satrap, a regional governor, who was responsible for collecting taxes, maintaining order, and administering justice. The satraps reported directly to the king and were overseen by royal inspectors called the eyes and ears of the king, who traveled the empire checking for corruption and incompetence. He standardized weights, measures, and coinage across the entire empire, making trade between distant regions possible on a scale never seen before. And then he built the roads. The royal road stretched over 1,500 miles from the Persian capital of Susa to the city of Sardis in western Turkey. A message carried by relay riders could travel this distance in just 7 days, in an age when most communication moved at the pace of a walking human. Herodotus, the Greek historian, wrote of the Persian postal riders, "Neither snow nor rain, nor heat nor darkness stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds." 2,500 years later, a version of that phrase is still inscribed on the main post office in New York City. Darius also built Persepolis, a ceremonial capital of breathtaking scale and beauty, where representatives from every corner of the empire came to pay tribute to the king. The stone reliefs on its walls showed dozens of different peoples: Egyptians, Babylonians, Indians, Greeks, Ethiopians, all bringing their own distinct offerings, not as slaves, as subjects of a functioning, multicultural empire. But the Persian Empire had a problem it could never fully solve: Greece. The Greek city-states on the western edge of the empire were constantly restless. In 499 BCE, the Greek cities of Ionia, on the coast of what is now Turkey, revolted against Persian rule. Athens sent ships to help them. The revolt was crushed, but Darius didn't forget. In 490 BCE, he sent an army to punish Athens. At the Battle of Marathon, a smaller Athenian force defeated the Persian army in one of history's most famous upsets. The messenger who ran to Athens to announce the victory, a distance of about 25 miles, is the origin of the modern marathon race. Darius died before he could try again. His son Xerxes assembled the largest invasion force the ancient world had ever seen. Estimates ranged from 100,000 to 300,000 soldiers, and marched on Greece in 480 BCE. He burned Athens. But at the Battle of Salamis, the Greek navy, outnumbered and outgunned on paper, destroyed the Persian fleet in a narrow strait where the Persian size became a disadvantage. Xerxes watched from a throne on the shore as his fleet was dismantled. The Persian army withdrew. Greece was never conquered. It was the beginning of the end. Not immediately, but the Greek wars drained Persian resources and, more importantly, cracked the image of Persian invincibility. For 150 more years, the Persian Empire endured, weakened by internal power struggles, court conspiracies, and the constant drain of the western frontier. Then, in 334 BCE, a young Macedonian king crossed into Persian territory with 40,000 soldiers. His name was Alexander. In just 10 years, Alexander the Great dismantled the entire Persian Empire, battle by battle, city by city. He defeated Darius III 3 times in open battle, at Granicus, at Issus, at Gaugamela. Darius III fled each time and was eventually murdered by his own commanders. Alexander burned Persepolis, the great ceremonial capital Darius had built, in what many historians believe was a deliberate act of symbolic revenge for the burning of Athens 150 years earlier. The empire that Cyrus had built from nothing, that had ruled half the world for 2 centuries, was gone. But not everything disappeared. Alexander was so impressed by the Persian administrative system that he kept much of it intact. The satrap system, the roads, the multicultural approach to governance, all of it continued under Macedonian rule, and later under the Seleucid Empire that followed. Cyrus's ideas outlasted Cyrus's empire. The Persian Empire is one of history's most underappreciated civilizations in the Western world, partly because most of what we know about it was written by its enemies, the Greeks. Herodotus, our primary source for much of Persian history, was Greek. He wrote with Greek biases. The Persians in his accounts are often presented as decadent, tyrannical, or simply as the villains that the heroic Greeks defeated. But archaeology tells a different story. The Cyrus Cylinder, the reliefs at Persepolis, the administrative records of the empire, they describe a civilization of remarkable sophistication and, by the standards of the ancient world, unusual tolerance. The Persian Empire asked a question that every large multi-ethnic state has struggled with ever since. How do you hold together a vast, diverse population without destroying what makes each part of it distinct? Cyrus's answer was, you don't try to make them all the same. You make them all feel respected. It worked for 200 years. Empires that followed, Roman, Mongol, Ottoman, British, all grappled with the same question. Some borrowed from Persia's answer, most didn't. We're still asking the same question today. If this made you see the ancient world differently, please hit like and subscribe. Next week, Cleopatra. Not the Hollywood version, the real one. If you have any questions or would like to contribute with the subject, please leave a comment. See you next week.